Few days ago, as I was reading and watching John Bradley's interviews for purposes of my video, as I was looking for some reliable statements, proofs and hints, I came up to a more than interesting interview. Today I'm going to introduce you with a major theory that I actually came up to, as I already said, while reading John Bradley's interviews, an actor that portrays Samuel Tarly in Game of Thrones. While being interviewed by Hollywood Reporter, a multi-platform American digital and print magazine that focuses mostly on television and entertainment industries, Bradley came up with a theory based on the object in Game of Thrones opening credits that is identical to the, as he said, gyroscope that is hanging inside the Citadel. John Bradley theorized and might have even figured out Game of Thrones ending. Bradley said, "I only became aware of that after I saw the episode. On the day it was all green screen, it's only after I saw the episode and people started telling me about the gyroscope. I think it could mean any number of things. One theory is that we're seeing now and how we're experiencing Game of Thrones is Sam telling the story of Game of Thrones. If you take the logic of the story now, the story of Westeros and the story of the battle for the Iron Throne, it would be a book in that library. The visual motive of that is you're about to be told a story, the sense of an idea of being told a story and people gaining that knowledge, the way Sam is absorbing knowledge in the library. Each episode of Game of Thrones has started the same way ever since the show began 6 years ago, with the same opening credits, and while we have always been wondering what one particular object that looks like mechanical sun is, the origin of this and one more object has finally been revealed in the season 6 finale. Beside those reveals that some of you surely noticed, about which in a few moments I'm going to introduce you with in details, today you will also be introduced with a few proofs that beside those two objects are also going favor to already mentioned Bradley's theory. While the season 6 finale was full of surprises, satisfying moments and the deaths of the major characters, there's one detail that you might have missed when Sam arrived at the Citadel and entered the extraordinary library. Despite a few obstacles that Sam had with Maester seated at the large counter, Sam finally entered the library and there it is, chandelier-looking contraption that looks exactly like the astrolabe sun object from the opening credits that we've been watching for 6 years in all 60 episodes. Before explaining what is the purpose of this chandelier-looking contraption, which name is actually astrolabe, let me firstly introduce you with its purpose in the opening credits. As it can be seen, the creators of the title sequence decided to place the map on the inner surface of a sphere with an astrolabe sun object at the center. The camera would then visit different parts of the map, while illustrations on the astrolabe covered some of the backstory to the series. As we all know, the Game of Thrones title sequences introduces every episode and changes depending on the locations visited in that particular episode. The opening credits consist of a three-dimensional map of the world, with the continents of Westeros and Essos located on the inner surface of a sphere. At the center of the sphere is a light source, effectively a sun surrounded by an astrolabe-like arrangement of rotating rings. The sequence opens with a close-up of the sun and the astrolabe surrounding it, while the most interesting parts are relief details that are visible on the astrolabe in both Game of Thrones opening credits and in the world's greatest library, since those two actually are the same object. Relief details on that object are showing a volcano destroying a city while Dragon watches on, and several people escaping in a boat, a reference to the doom of Valyria and the Targaryens' escape from it. After a few moments, there's another close-up of the detail on the astrolabe, this time showing the Stark direwolf, Lannister lion and Baratheon stag engaging the Targaryen dragon in combat, reference to Robert's rebellion. The last close-up of the relief detail on the astrolabe, which is also the ending of the title sequence, is now showing the animals representing the various noble houses of Westeros bowing to the victorious Baratheon stag. The Game of Thrones logo then appears over the astrolabe, with the heads of a dragon, wolf, lion and stag emerging from the side of the logo. As for why it is specifically an astrolabe with moving parts, Company Elastic that created this, beside a few other title sequences for HBO, came up with a vision of a mad monk in a tower somewhere who was somehow keeping track of all this action and creating as he went. Now, for all of you that are still wondering, why is that thing from the opening credits by the name of Astrolabe also in the library located in Old Town, same library in which Sam will eventually become a maester? It's actually pretty simple, so let me explain it to you in a few sentences. Just as it looks like at first glance, one of its functions is to reflect sunlight from the window high above around the room over mirrors, because the maesters who use and maintain the library would never risk having candles anywhere near the books. However, the most important function of Astrolabe, or more accurately an armillary sphere, is to locate and predict positions of the stars and planets in order to provide local time and more. This function is of tremendous importance for the Maesters of the Citadel, as it helps them to determine when the long seasons of Westeros officially begin and end, about which they are informing the castles and cities of the Seven Kingdoms by sending out white ravens to share the news. Now we're coming to the most important parts of a theory that John Bradley came up with in an interview, theory that is supported with Astrolabe itself among a few other proofs. Angus Swole, title designer of Game of Thrones opening credits, explained why it is specifically an astrolabe with moving parts with, imagine it's in medieval tower and monks are watching over it and it's a living map and it's shaped like a ball that's 30 feet in diameter and these guys watch over it. They are caretakers of this map. This Swole's explanation raises a few questions such as, does this mean that the map in the credits could actually be a physical map kept in the library inside the Citadel and is caretaken by the Maesters, by Samuel himself? Well, maybe. By this theory, Game of Thrones series would actually end with old Sam looking up from a book as he finally reads his tale, meaning that all events that we've seen and all events that we are about to see in the upcoming seasons had already taken place and are actually written in Sam's book that he is reading to someone. As you have probably figured it out, the astrolabe and the changing map of Westeros that we see before every single episode in this theory represents the unfolding of a story being told by Sam himself. While this theory already sounds convincing and while in my opinion there's a high possibility of this theory coming true, there's one more proof that is going in favor to this theory, one more object that I mentioned in the beginning of this video, an object which origin has also been revealed in the season 6 finale. When Sam arrives at the Citadel, he is greeted by a maester who uses a distinctive pair of glasses to read the text in front of him. Those glasses, to be exact, its lenses, believe it or not, we have most probably seen in each episode of Game of Thrones in the opening credits. As we can see in every title sequence, while zooming in on the city of King's Landing and while zooming out of the wall, the map is actually seen through lenses that appears to be just like those glasses. In conclusion, there's most certainly a high possibility of this Bradley's theory coming true, there's a high possibility that the story of Game of Thrones has already been written down and is this whole time being narrated by Samuel Tarly. If Game of Thrones would really end this way, if this theory would actually come true, don't you think that George R. R. Martin would fit perfectly as the old Sam, who is looking up from a book as he finally reads the whole story to either little Sam or Jon's child, or even to both of them? While this would be Martin's first appearance in Game of Thrones, it most certainly would not be the first time the showrunners decided to pay their respect towards Martin throughout the series, even though this would be the most important and the most noticed one. In fact, the showrunners already mentioned George R. R. Martin and his genius mind several times throughout the series. I'm sure there are a few among us that remember Macumber, the blue-eyed giant that is, according to some stories in Westeros, the reason why the sky is blue, as according to a legend, the entire known world is a tiny object floating in the eye of Macumber. However, in the A Song of Ice and Fire novels, there is no legend about the sky being blue because the entire world is in the eye of a blue-eyed giant named Macumber, nor any comparable fable. With this being said, it's pretty easy to conclude that Macumber is a meta-narrative reference to author George R. R. Martin, since the entire fictional universe originated inside of his head. It's also known that author of epic fantasy novels, A Song of Ice and Fire, which was later adapted into the HBO series Game of Thrones, George filmed a cameo appearance in unaired pilot episode of the TV series as a background Pentoshi merchant wearing a gigantic hat. Having in mind that he has almost already appeared in the series, George portraying old Sam in the last scene of Game of Thrones most certainly doesn't seem impossible. Altogether, this John Bradley's theory that is supported with a few proofs definitely sounds interesting, but I leave it to you to decide whether or not this theory will eventually come true.